Good morning and welcome to the Meet the Candidates for New York City Council Speaker Series. My name is Annie Garniva and I'm the Vice President for Policy and Special Initiatives of the New York City Employment and Training Coalition. This morning, we have the pleasure of sitting down with Councilmember Adrienne Adams for the fourth of our scheduled conversations with the City Council Speaker candidates. Thank you to the members and partners that have joined us to hear from the candidate. I just want to give a little bit of background on the coalition for those of you that are joining us for the first time. The coalition supports the workforce development community to ensure that every New Yorker has access to the skills, training, and education needed to thrive in the local economy, and that every business is able to maintain a highly skilled workforce. NYCETC's membership is composed of 200 workforce providers, educational institutions, and labor management organizations that provide job training and employment services to nearly 600,000 New Yorkers. Before we get started, all participants should know that you will be muted for the duration of this call. Councilmember Adams will be provided an opportunity to talk to us about her candidacy and answer some questions in a fireside chat format. We'll then open it up for a few questions from several members and partners. Please type in your questions along with name, title, and organization throughout the conversation using the chat icon located on the bottom of the panel. If you're called upon to ask your question, we'll unmute you so that you may ask your question directly to our guest. Please note that we'll try our best to get to as many questions as time will allow. I would love to thank Councilmember Adams for her leadership and for her being here with us this morning. And just a little bit of background on Councilmember before we get started. Adrienne Adams is a member of the New York City Council and is the first woman elected to represent the 28th Council District, which encompasses the Queens neighborhoods of Jamaica, Rochdale Village, Richmond Hill, and South Ozone Park. A Hollis, Queens native and lifelong resident of Southeast Queens, Adams was serving a third term as a chairperson of Community Board 12, the borough's second largest community board at the time of her election to council in 2017. In that capacity, she chaired the Education Committee and was that board's primary advocate for education equity for children in school districts 27, 28, and 29. Within the council, she chairs the Committee on Public Safety and co-chairs the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus, serves in the committees on civil service and labor, finance, land use, and rules, privileges, and elections. She is also a member of the Progressive and the Women's Caucus. Adams is a longstanding member of several community-based organizations, including the NAACP and the National Action Network. She's also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority and is a Spelman College alumnus. Councilmember Adams, it's so wonderful to see you. Congratulations on your re-election, and we welcome you to today's conversation.
Thank you very much, Annie. What a pleasure it is to be with you and everyone this morning. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, and we particularly appreciate you taking the time to talk to the workforce community today in light of the many panels and forums that you've had and the letter that a number of you put out. So again, just really appreciate you taking the time, and we really look forward to continuing working with you in the next council. Pleasure,
thank you.
So just given your long and vast expertise and experience in local politics, you've held a variety of leadership positions. You're clearly on a number of important caucuses and committees. So we'd love to just learn a little bit more about what compelled you to run for the speaker position in this particular moment in time.
Sure, thank you for the question. Well, you know, my decision to run for speaker isn't a new one. It's not nuanced at all. It's been an inspiration of mine ever since I stepped foot as an elected official into the halls of City Hall, being the first woman to lead District 28 in a 2017 special election. You know, we still hadn't had in 2017, and to this day, we've never had a Black speaker leading the New York City Council. You know, so I wasn't coaxed into it. I wasn't persuaded. I wasn't cajoled. This is a destiny move for me. You know, the opportunities presented itself, and I just see it as a destiny move, a powerful one, given the majority women coming into the council. And I can't tell you, I'm just head over heels about that. I believe that we have to have a woman of color leading this body. I don't believe that any of us should be shy about saying that women can govern ourselves. And optics are very, very important right now coming into leadership in this particularly awesome city council that I'm looking forward to working with these brilliant minds. So, we need a speaker who's innovative and courageous to lead the most diverse city council in the history of New York City. So that's why I'm running.
I would say as a majority women staff, we are also very thrilled to be working with everybody moving forward. And just to nail down a little bit more, we are a workforce development and economic development justice organization. Our community has been really focused on, especially given all the elements that COVID has unearthed. A lot of things that we've been talking about for a long time have really been exposed by COVID and the recession that we're still in. There's definitely, we're noticing a trend of some jobs are coming back, but not the same jobs. And definitely a lot of the people that we care about, a lot of the communities that have always been left behind we are very concerned that the trend is they're getting left behind at a faster and more deep rate. A lot of the low income jobs and the low level jobs that used to be access points have now been really questioned. We can really see it in people choosing to not come back to those jobs because of safety issues, because of equity and low pay issues. And we believe that those are all workforce issues that training and allows people to kind of thrive and grow within a career. So given the moment that we're in and the urgency of COVID and the recession that continues to exist, what are some unfulfilled workforce priorities that you would like to come to see to fruition as Speaker of Council moving forward, if you were to be elected?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for that. And everything that you said, I agree with. And taking a look at the wide perspective of just the crisis that this pandemic has caused our workforce, majority, of this workforce, essential workers even that are no longer working, because as you've said, there are safety issues, there are safety concerns. One of my biggest concerns, and I'm sure yours too, and everybody on this call, is how do we bring everybody back? How do we convince everybody that, that the time is now to get back to work? So one of my priorities when it comes to workforce is going to be, again, to offer these services. People may not necessarily know about them. We're going to have to be our own best bullhorn out here. I know in my district 28, which I call the Great 28 because it's so diverse and terrific, we have to do a better job of communicating the resources that this city offers. Workforce development, your organization, your coalition is tremendous, but there are corners in our districts that are unaware of the great work and the great things that you do. So it's going to be incumbent upon us as a council to make sure that we give you that bully pulpit, that we are that bully pulpit for you to share those resources, because we are our own best PR when it comes to getting that information out there to folks. Too many times I have forums, I sponsor forums, and we bring in resources for the community. And the community just, those that come, wow, I never knew this was here. Wow, I never knew this was available. We've got to do a better job as council members in making sure that our valuable organizations are given the platform that they need to ensure that this workforce comes back, that particularly our youth get trained and our youth get placed appropriately, because it's not just enough to do the training, as your reports will say. It's not just enough to do the training, but we must make sure that we're looking down the road and have that placement available. So again, my priority is going to make sure that I give you the voice that you need to be heard for our constituents in the city that need you so desperately.
Well, we certainly appreciate that. Definitely one of the challenges has been having people understand that when you talk about jobs, you're really talking about how people get into those jobs. And then you pull it back even further, and what are the various access points, and how complicated and for lack of a better term, all over the place the workforce system is. How do people learn about it? How do we make the system itself be more reflective of the communities that we are trying to serve, and what are their actual needs and interests? So are there particular challenges that you have faced in relative to workforce and economic development that you feel still need to be brought into the next council that you are looking forward to working on, that would love to learn a little bit more about?
Yeah, it all comes back to, the funding that we all need to make sure that we can bring the services that we need in. I'm looking towards actually battering through this horrible digital divide, which has been substantial in the harm that it's caused, particularly our students that have had no access, our students in low-income neighborhoods that have had no access. And the ironic thing about it is that our educational systems have the devices. They have, an excess, quite frankly, of devices. But our students, our elementary school students, our high school students, our college students, and even our residents who are of age, our adult residents, do not necessarily have the access, have the Wi-Fi access to even participate in this system. How tragic is that? We've got devices, we've got the equipment, but we have no infrastructure. That's preposterous to me. And we really take a look at it, it becomes bizarre. So one of my priorities is going to make sure that we are wired, particularly in our underserved communities, so that everybody can participate in this educational system. Everybody can participate in the access of information that's out there, but for the taking.
And just to continue on the budget front, we were very appreciative to have your support during this budget round. You spoke at our virtual rally around right before the budget negotiations, and particularly on things like bridge programs and making sure that employment is an actual part of the recovery process. So just really appreciate your support there, and you bringing up how central budget is relative to these conversations. Are there any particular, something that we saw all across was a lot of budget cuts that happened on all human services, but we found that particularly for workforce programs who are highly dependent on city contracts, and given the fact that there was such a huge increase in demand through the pandemic, a lot of our organizations saw something like a 40 to 50% increase in demand of services, but on the flip side, about 20 to 30% of them saw across the board budget cuts in their contracts. We're grateful to see some of those come back this time around, but given a system that is already highly underfunded, are there areas in the budget that you saw that definitely need to be addressed moving forward, from a funding or a resource perspective?
There were many, but I will say this about the budget process and what I've noticed, as a member of the budget negotiating team, is that we've got such a broken system, particularly, and I'll just call them out, particularly in the way of contracts and MWBE, and the way that appropriation of funds are handled. So while we do have, a number of areas that we have to see come back strongly in the budget, we've got to fix that process behind the scenes. We've got money that is being held up for reasons unknown to fantastic organizations that we need out here, to educational organizations, to crisis management organizations, and a multitude of others. And that money is being held up. Millions of dollars are being held up because of so-called contract snafus, or we just don't have time, or take a number, or this is just the way, any number of excuses. So that system has got to be dealt with. It's got to be fixed, and it's got to be made right for everybody. This headache of bureaucracy, it's enough already. We've had enough of it. We know that our partners, such as yourselves, have had enough of it, and we've got to be honest enough and transparent enough to call it out and deal with it and fix it.
Well, I know that's music to many people's ears on this call. Definitely look forward to supporting HSC's Just Pay campaign and really seeing how these things pan out in the next administration. So you touched base a bit on what the council infrastructure is, and would love to discuss that a little bit more. One challenge that we've noticed is that the workforce system is spread across so many agencies. I believe the number is 23 agencies, and we have found that that means there's very little oversight. Accountability is very challenging to think about, and it has led to this system where it's kind of like the elephant in the room. You're only looking at different slices of it, but never the whole pie. So we're wondering, given this kind of oversight challenge, would you support the creation of a committee on workforce development within the council to allow for more transparency and oversight with these funding allocations?
Yeah, I certainly would. Excuse me. Such a committee would actually give us the help that we need, quite frankly, on the council in providing that oversight that we need. We need those checks and balances. We need the checks and balances when it comes to the council working with the mayor's administration. I'm happy to hear that the incoming mayor recognizes that there is a problem in the agencies as they've been operating. And I am encouraged that, such a group would be welcome, to the admin as well. We have to get a grip on, on these allocations. We have to get a grip on systemically what is right and what is wrong, because there are some great things that we have, but there are some things that are just not working. We've got a massive equity issue across the board with delivery of services. We have a massive issue of who gets what when it comes to gender and LGBTQ services. So we just have a massive disparity when it comes to who gets what and why. And I think that that this workforce committee coalition is going to be a tremendous asset to the council. So the answer is most definitely yes, I would support it.
That's really great to hear. Thank you. And you alluded to this, part of the problem is that the system itself is so fractured and all over the place. And one of our central points beyond oversight is really looking at how the system is structured. And again, all of our perspectives comes from learning from service providers and the challenges that they face in delivering these contracts and serving the community. And we are looking to create a more structurally realigned and streamlined system that really emphasizes collaboration among service providers in order to, again, push an equity and access point for communities. So looking at the whole system itself of how resources are allocated, what are some challenges that you think really need to be brought up to the top and attacked head on relative to the workforce and economic development system?
Yeah, again, these are loaded questions and I appreciate them because we can talk ad infinitum, about what's wrong and what's broken, and there's so much to fix. We've got to work on, again, the way that we get this information out here. We've got to work on the stuff that really, really works and why the things that really work, like the bridge program, that Debbie Rose and I fought so hard to keep at that budget negotiating table, why that was even looked at, for any less than what we were demanding that was given, in that bridge program. So, it's a lot. We have to focus on the areas, and again, there are so many of them because of the pandemic, the areas that have been particularly neglected. And again, we're not just talking about training. We offer training. DYCD offers training. Other places offer training. We know that CUNY, the SEEK programs offer training, and all of those entities offer training. But we've got to make sure that who we are funding is using that money to the fullest extent of its intention. So it's going to be, and again, I'm coming back to the coalition that you just mentioned. this oversight coalition is going to be responsible for things like that, for making sure that there is transference from just an idea of training to where are we putting these, these worthy applicants now that need employment. There are so many places out there that are looking for employees right now. There should be no gap. There should be no hole. There should be, no means of non-entry for everyone that is seeking employment right now. So we've got a number of things that we're looking at. We're looking at how to get the information out there to our workforce that need to be employed. And we're also looking at the quality of services that we're providing to those individuals that are seeking work.
Yeah, that's great. And again, bridge programs, I particularly appreciate you flagging that, 1 million was the baseline for this pilot that we're fighting for. And if we're to increase access, bridge programs are just critical to all of us. So that's really great to hear. And so part of the budget element that we've been looking at is really thinking through how federal recovery money can be accessible and used towards workforce. We saw in this budget process an allocation for programming such as the Cleanup Corps, which we find is a useful way to look at things, but it is not a sustainable process or program. And we're really looking at creating programs that would kind of launch people's careers. So what steps would you take to make funds more sustainable for and long-term for workforce development if you were to be elected speaker? And how do you view, or if you have any insight on how recovery dollars can be used in the immediate term?
Yeah, we have to be really careful about how we pull down those funds. It's taken us such a while to get there and to receive those precious funds. We were looking at them months and months and months ago, hoping that they would be here. And we got some, and then the allocation by the admin went one way when we may have wanted it to go another way. So the meeting of the minds was not there. It's going to be incumbent on the next speaker to make sure that there's cohesion between both sides of City Hall, making sure that there is communication, making sure that there is an infrastructure that is built tight and strong with those who will be working with the speaker on which we call our side, the council side, and those that, of course, are working with the mayor on the admin side. That infrastructure has to be tighter. And the conversations have to be pointed conversations. Again, it's going to take a speaker that has courage, somebody that's strong and not willing to back down. That's the way that, and not in an adversarial way, but that is the way that council can tend to to soften their position or lose these conversations. And it's my intention to just make sure that the strength of coalitions like yours is brought to the admin, fought for, through our, through our team on the council side, to just build that, to make our points heard, and really to draw you all in even more, because I mean, you are the voices that, that are the ears to the ground on this. And we are, like I said earlier, we are your megaphones. So it's going to be, for me, it's going to be communication all the way around, communication between you and I, communication between my team and the speaker's office, and the mayor's administration. So it's going to take a collaboration of efforts. It is not rocket science. We can do this.
Thank you. Very true. People just got to talk to each other. So to bring it back to a particular initiative that we've been working really hard on over the last year, we published a set of agenda and blueprint called the Inclusive Growth Blueprint through the New York City Inclusive Growth Initiative that we launched about 1.5 years ago. This includes over 50 recommendations for the future of economic development, workforce development, and affordable housing in order to prioritize infrastructure and development projects that proactively address long-term disparities that we see in our communities, and really focus on using infrastructure and economic development as a way to meet material needs of New Yorkers, especially those that have been left out of the decision-making process, as well as really the economic growth opportunities that come out of those types of projects. So would love to know which, if any, of these recommendations stood out to you, and what you would prioritize within the next city council session when it comes to really ensuring that economic growth is inclusive and equitable within the parameters, obviously, of city council speaker.
First of all, Annie, the report was awesome. So, and I have to tell you that the recommendations were a bitter pill for me to swallow, actually, in all honesty. As a council member for District 28 in Southeast Queens, a district that has been underserved for decades and decades, I really want to list all 51 recommendations, quite honestly, quite honestly. But I'm just going to give you a few here, and I've actually noted them. You know, I am very active as co-chair of the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus, very, very active. You know, I take that role very seriously as a woman of color. You know, I know firsthand that what's standing in the way of so much that we've tried to advance in our city is related to systemic racism. You know, and the recommendations pretty much bore that out. And moving from, you know, from that point, the supported investment in community development, financial institutions, or CDFIs, you know, as chair of Community Board 12, you know, for 3 terms, we tried to implement CDFIs through our economic development committee at Community Board 12. I had many meetings with our bids and with York College to discuss how to work together to provide alternative financial solutions to traditional lending institutions. So it's really, really important that everybody understand what, you know, CDFIs are and how important they can be within our communities that need them the most. Also, with such a large, robust immigrant community, and again, I'm being very selfish about this, District 28 is one of the most diverse districts on the entire planet. I certainly do support creating pathways to integrate immigrants with skills that are gained abroad into New York City's workforce. So that's very, very important to me also. We've got a tremendous language barrier issue. We see it when it comes to voting. We see it when it comes to learning. We see it when it comes to job placements. And really all aspects of growth in our wonderful city of New York. Our immigrant population is tremendously important for us, and we must do a better job of supporting the needs of our immigrants. So that's important also. The small business piece, also tremendous. Workforce programs and investments that don't necessarily help small businesses. And again, and I'll circle back, you know, to something that is more than obvious to us, affordable housing, your affordable housing recommendations. I keep saying, don't put me in a place where I have to talk about, you know, the ridiculousness of AMI and the structure of AMI and why that's so harmful, you know, to gaining successful affordable housing across the city, and what that horrible model of AMI that I was just about to say worthless formula. Wouldn't that be a play on words? Of what of the damage that formula has done, you know, to our city. And just taking a look at it, you know, why isn't it localized? It seems like common sense to me. And again, I don't want to get off on a tangent about it, but that's another one of my pet peeves. So all of this tells us that we have to be courageous in our movement towards a new day for New York City. This is not going to be the leadership of the old guard, but it has to be nuanced by a creative speaker who again has the strength and the courage to work together and to just push back the old stuff and create a new reality.
Yeah, you mentioned the formula. It's I've lived in Flatbush for about 10 years now, and just to see the jarring just amount of growth that has happened, and the number of posters that I walk by with completely ridiculous percentages that I know none of my neighbors can participate in. It really put, even for me, a real tangible perspective on the work that I was doing and seeing it in my own community every day. So completely agree with you.
Yeah.
So before I open it up to questions within our audience, another really critical piece that has been coming out of the recession and really the broader national conversation is how we connect issues of resiliency and climate change and ensure that work that is being done there that is so critical. I mean, we're many decades behind on that work. How we make sure that that process does not perpetuate things like gentrification, or really making sure that our communities have access to the jobs that are being built in service to tackling climate change in the clean energy sector that's growing, in the fossil and the building efficiency sector. Some of the laws that the council has passed open up the door for some really great investments, but how do we make sure that that work is also equitable and is used as a way to be open to our communities rather than another way of pushing people out. So wondering if you have any thoughts and work that you look forward to doing in that space.
Oh, that's a great question. My greatest asset is going to be my human capital in the way of these amazing new members that are coming in who have districts that look just like mine, districts that have been underserved, districts that have been underwater, districts that have had, amazing rates of asthma and other diseases caused by, the things that we just have not done because there has not been any care. So my stock is going to be in my members coming in that believe in what we have to do now. Like I just said, it's going to be a brand new day, a whole new thought process and planning process because of the experiences that all of us are bringing in. It's not just a few anymore, but again, it's going to be majority coming from outer boroughs with outer borough experience. That's real lived stuff. It's interesting to me. And I'll just share this with you also. It's interesting to me how sometimes the public takes a look at elected officials like we live in an ivory tower somewhere, and are so disconnected, to our constituents and the way we live and how we live. I've lived next door to a foreclosed property for over a decade. I've seen, squatters come in and out of that property until about a year ago when it was finally purchased. I can't believe that it's finally purchased. The grounds are now, it's a beautiful corner property right here in good old Southeast Queens, where we still have the issues that everybody else has, amplified mufflers. We've got, unfortunately, gun violence, within walking distance of my home. I mean, these are real bread and butter issues. And I said all that to say again that the council members coming in, just like myself, live real lives in real communities, in the heart of our communities, not in ivory towers, sequestered far away somewhere. This is where we live. Why we chose to run, why we choose to, to do what we do. We choose this because we are this. I've been talked about by my neighbors because whenever I get on a platform and I look at them and I say, I'm still your neighbor. I'm just your next door neighbor. And one of my neighbors had to tell me, I didn't vote for you to be my neighbor. I voted for you to be my voice in the New York City Council. You're my council member. So you're not just my neighbor anymore. But I got to tell you, Annie, to my heart, I'm still your next door neighbor. So my bread and butter again is going to be my human capital management when it comes to the new membership coming in, experiencing the issues of climate change, again, experiences what we've gone through in Southeast Queens for decades in flooding and the need for basement apartments to save people's lives. So it's all of that we're bringing in.
Excellent. And definitely looking forward to also bringing lived experience from our members to your to future council. So now we're going to open it up to a few questions from our membership so that you can hear directly from them and just really get the voices front and center here. So our first question comes from Wayne Ho, who is the executive director of the Chinese American Planning Council and an NYCETC board member. Hi, Wayne. Nice to see you.
Hey, good seeing everyone. Thank you, Councilmember Adams, for joining us. As you know, the city of New York contracts out over $4 billion a year to human services nonprofit organizations to do a plethora of essential services. And there's also an additional $4 billion plus that comes from the Department of Education to nonprofits to do similar services. So You've touched upon already about the budget process as well as making sure that organizations are funded. My question is, if you become speaker, what would be your priorities around ensuring that our human services workers could be better compensated, get better benefit packages, because they are essential workers, and we want to make sure, and we are limited as nonprofits because of the contracts that we get on how we can compensate and support our workers.
Yeah, great to see you, Wayne, and thank you for the question. As I rallied with, human service workers about 2 weeks ago out there at City Hall Park, I gave voice very loudly, as I normally do, to that cause of ensuring that our human service workers get that equal pay that they deserve. And again, as speaker, it's going to be that forcefulness, bringing that to the administration, bringing that directly to the mayor's office to make sure that your voices are heard. It is inexcusable, to me, as a woman of color, knowing that the majority of our human service workers are women, and women of color, that we are still being treated as less than. So as you can imagine, me being who I am in the flesh, will certainly prioritize those issues.
Thank you. Thank you, Wayne. Our next question is from Cristian Gonzalez Rivera, the Director of Strategic Policy Initiatives at the Brookdale Center for Healthy Aging at Hunter College, as well as a member of our Inclusive Growth Steering Committee that we previously referenced. Hi, Cristian.
Hi, Annie. Really good to see you. And great to see you too, Council Member. I really appreciated how, earlier in the discussion, you were talking about how it's the low-wage workers that are really falling behind in this so-called recovery. That's really important, and it's really good to get that out there. One thing that I wanted to say is that, it's among those low-wage workers who are falling behind, it's older workers that are falling even further behind. They're at the end of the train when it comes to this. Case in point, more than half of them have been looking for a job for 5+ months, which is the sort of the top of the category in terms of, long-term unemployed. So, and the fact of the matter is that, a lot of people think well, of course, their skills are outdated. But one of the things that we saw during this recession is that, in fact, a lot of older workers were able to make the transition to remote work if they were able to work remotely, which was not the case for the majority of people, as you know so well. So that ageist idea about they're just outdated is just false. And yet ageism persists among employers. So my question is, what would you do as speaker to really push the council to combat ageism among New York City employers, to really change this? To really change minds so that older workers can get, the financial stability they need before moving on to the next stage of their lives.
What a great question. Thank you so much for that. As one who fights ageism, the thought of ageism, and just the knowledge, Cristian, that you just brought to the table. And thank you for bringing that out into the forefront, because everybody doesn't want to talk about this. This is not a sexy topic at all. And speaking about ageist principles and ageism and what goes on out there in the workforce. And the truth of the matter is that when older workers are given the opportunity, so there is still that fallacy out there that for some reason that older workers do not have the capacity to keep up with the times that are changing, the technology and all that. And that's simply not the case. As a matter of fact, what we find is that, as you said, older workers ramp up very, very quickly, and in a lot of cases are even more enthused to do the work because they have been in the workforce, in the workplaces that some folks coming up now new into the process have not necessarily seen. So that work is welcome. So, as speaker, again, there are a number of priorities that, that must be brought to the forefront. This one is another one of those, and I will be a voice to champion, the need of older workers. Again, it's something that has to be spoken of more frequently, and not, shoved up underneath the carpet, like it doesn't exist. So again, it's going to take a courageous speaker to do that. I do have the courage, and it will be brought to the forefront to fight for the interests of our older workers.
Yeah, we definitely have noticed a very needed trend and best practice to focus programming, like any other human service programming, focus workforce programming relative to specific populations and demographics. So both really appreciate that question and really appreciate your highlighting of the solution. So similarly to that regard, we have a couple of questions from members who have submitted questions on the call today that I'll ask. One of them is from Kenneth Edwards, who's the Leadership and Organizing Specialist at the Center for Employment Opportunities, which works with people impacted by the criminal justice system to help them get back into the workplace. So his question is relative to the passing of the Less is More New York and the scheduled closing of Rikers Island. What are your plans for workforce programming regarding directly impacted individuals returning home?
Yeah, that's another great question. So, you know, as a public safety chair and one who has been involved as of late with our criminal justice committee as well, that's another very important issue for us. We know that, the situation at Rikers is dire right now. Who would have ever thought that it could ever get any worse? So, you know, detainees are hurting, workers are hurting. Everybody is hurting when it comes to that horrible system that should have been closed a long time ago, quite frankly. It's another, and I hate to, you know, as they used to say or still say, sound like a broken record, but there are so many priorities that have to be pushed ahead, that have to be spoken about and dealt with. And this is another one of those. We are going to have to take care of those formerly incarcerated individuals that deserve to be placed into our workspaces as much as anybody else deserves to be placed in our workspaces. You know, I'm championing a legislation right now that should, you know, go through, and it has to do with the CCRB when it comes to protecting commissary funds. That goes along with protecting the formerly incarcerated as well. So it's a holistic response, you know, to your question. It is going to take a lot of different places to work to restore our formerly incarcerated individuals to the fullness that they are supposed to have and deserve to have in the city.
Oh, that's great. Absolutely. Another question from our membership comes from Helen Kogan, who is the executive director of NPower New York, which is a tech training organization, as well as an NYCETC board member. And this question really is around making sure that we connect employers to the workforce system and how we tackle making sure that the business side is participating and active in workforce. And she's wondering, how do we incentivize industry to continue to invest in New York City, given the challenge of some local communities really being distrustful and against corporations coming into their neighborhoods? What is a broader strategy to connect with employers and make sure that they're both invested and actively participating in the workforce system?
Yeah, another good one. Thank you, Helen, for that question. It is going to be incumbent upon, you know, upon us in the council and elsewhere to make sure that we are doing the appropriate outreach to employers who are critical to this process, to this ecosystem when it comes to workforce development, training, and prioritizing employment. So we're going to have to engage, do a better job of engaging employers. In some cases where I've seen in my district, employers are feeling very skittish, as you said, about entertaining, you know, any furtherance of, you know, of promotion of workforce development. And we're going to have to get out there, make our presence known, make the opportunities known, incentivize a lot better, create a better communication system with our employers that will bring them back into the fold where we need them.
That's excellent to hear, and definitely we have really ramped up our employer engagement and really want to make sure that employers are seeing themselves as both advocates and active participants of the system. At the end of the day, like you earlier referenced, small businesses are so hurting, and we definitely see the workforce system as a dual customer approach. Can't have one without the other. So that's really great to hear. We actually have a question from a member that's on with us today. Next up, we have Julia Stone, who is a community liaison at Graham Windham. Julia? We're just gonna have a second of tech.
Hi, good morning.
Julia.
Hi. Councilmember Adams, thank you for your support with Grand Wyndham with Fair Futures. What I wanted, yeah, I wanted to lift up to you today was a conversation I had in Hunts Point at our Family Enrichment Center, which is a frustration with the community, which is pervasive, about there being a market there with fabulous jobs that are union, and the difficulty of the community actually breaking into unionized jobs within their community. And from talking further with our other locations, I'm finding that this is a more pervasive problem and need, that our community would like to have access to these well-benefited union jobs as a way to lift themselves up. And I wanted to ask you, how can we create that access?
Oh my goodness, what a great question. Good to see you, Julia. Thank you for that. We're going to have to do a better job of engaging. And again, it's going to come down to communication practices, best practices of communication between unions and community. So where workforce development comes into play is you know, again, being that that megaphone to the community. We're going to have to engage the unions. We're going to have to find out what that barrier is. You know, we're going to have to break through that barrier. Our community must have access to union jobs. I'm a union baby. It's why I'm here right now, because of both of my parents that made sure that my sister and I, you know, grew up, you know, to appreciate middle-class life, you know, and I take that, and that's what I've taught, you know, my children who are now grown as well. So we're going to have to fight against any barrier that is disallowing access to good paying union jobs. When I talk to my partners in union, that's actually something that they tout to me all the time. We want to make sure that we are getting, you know, that our folks have access to good union paying jobs. So it's disheartening to hear that the community now faces a barrier in that. So we're going to have to open the door to communication to figure that out.
Thank you. And I'll make a plug for, you know, pre-apprenticeship programs as a form of bridge program is really critical in this particular conversation, and particularly with community-based organizations that are really connected to local community members to get them into that process. So the last question we'll ask comes from Robert Tucker, who again is not able to join us today, but submit a question. He's the owner of Black and White Training LLC, and his question is around the MWBE process, which unfortunately currently funding on city contracts have been awarded about 3% of all possible contracts for MWBEs. How do you plan to make the process for bidding more transparent and accessible for minority and women-owned businesses? Around, you know, both through the entirety of the RFP process and particularly within contracting?
Love the question. I've been a champion for MWBE since, you know, before becoming elected, and this again has been another disappointment to me as a member of the New York City Council, and coming in and having high hopes. I actually tried to become employed before I was elected, you know, in part of the admin side, you know, years and years ago, to work with the commissioner at that time for MWBEs, and you know, even with the comptroller, who wasn't comptroller then, to work within that division, and it never panned out. I was encouraged by the leadership, though, of, you know, of that entity, And then things just seem to fall apart again. And now we are again with MWBEs at 3%. That's disgraceful. Which I hope will be one of my signature moves, as speaker, will be to prioritize MWBEs like never before. The revitalization of JFK Airport, which I have, part of in my district, we have been really, really strong in demanding MWBEs be brought into, the building and the vendors and the concessions and everything new that's going on at JFK right now. So there is no excuse for New York City, the greatest city in the world, to be at a 3% MWBE rate. It is disgraceful again. And I'm going to put that plug in again for this new council that is coming in with a majority of women. So we are going to start turning some things on their heads when it comes to equity in the city of New York. And I appreciate that question so much.
And obviously this is preaching to the choir, but from what I gather, a wide percentage of that is on, of the current funding is also for white women-led organizations, and really making sure to push on the minority, the M in the MWBE. So really appreciate that and really look forward to working on that and making sure that the reason that we bring up this question is we are trying to broaden the perspective on what is workforce development and economic development, that it's small businesses and who owns, what wealth ownership looks like as a form of workforce development. So really appreciate your thoughtfulness on that. So this is, again, we really appreciate your time with us today, and really taking out, I know you're super busy, especially with the holidays coming up. I know that our membership really loves these kinds of chats, and we put everything up on YouTube. I'm always surprised to see the level of engagement that we have from our membership. So would just love to give you a moment before we end, if there's anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to cover, or a last parting words before we let you go.
I just want to thank you for inviting me. This meeting was very important to me, to engage with you and your membership, to make sure that that my position was heard, and that for those who don't know me, get an opportunity to at least know a little bit about me and, and my passion, for your cause. So again, thank you, NYCETC, for inviting me to be with you today. And as we end this wonderful forum, I'm still Councilmember Adrienne Adams from District 28 in Southeast Queens, representing the Great 28, as I call it, the most diverse district, or one of them in the entire borough. And I am running for Speaker of the New York City Council because I've been a voice for the people for over a decade. I've been advocating for all residents, children, seniors, championing, as you hear, from me, equity in all facets that affect the lives of New Yorkers. And this is a unique moment in time for us as a city, for leadership in the New York City Council and for the underserved communities in New York. I bring a perspective that knows our outer boroughs, their needs, and most importantly, the neglect that we've seen. The need to prioritize workforce development is certainly not lost on me because of my own lived experiences. So as Speaker of the New York City Council, I will not just bring my leadership skills, but a bird's eye view of decades of neglect in desperate need of repair. So we want to get New Yorkers back to work with the tools that are needed to succeed in the long term. That's what I'm always going to champion, particularly as the next Speaker of the New York City Council. So thanks again for all of you for having me here today, Annie. It's been a pleasure to be your co-host.
Likewise, thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your Friday.
Thank you so much. You too.
So that concludes the third of our conversations with the City Council Speaker candidates. Just a quick program note for everybody. We hope that you join us this coming Tuesday, December 7th for the next of our chats, when we'll be speaking with Councilmember Keith Powers, followed by Justin Brannon on Tuesday, December 14th, and Francisco Moya on Thursday, December 16th. We're also rescheduling our conversation with Councilmember Ayala and we'll keep you updated on when the next date is. So thank you all for joining us this morning. And of course, I want to once again thank you, Councilmember Adams, for being here with us in a really wonderful conversation. We wish you the best of luck with your candidacy. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.